Hey guys, back with another video. This time I'm going to talk about shooting in RAW and what that really means. So basically, most cameras, some of the better ones, will have the option of shooting in RAW. For instance, the portable Sony RX100 Mark IV definitely does. All the Mark 100s do. And then a lot of DSLRs will do that as well. So basically, when you shoot in RAW, what that does is it captures all the information, the most information you can get probably that the sensor is capturing. It doesn't throw away information like what a JPEG do, which is standard. So when you buy your camera and you turn it on, it'll always default to the JPG, which stands for Joint Photographic Group. And what that does, it favors smaller file sizes, but it also does a lot of in-camera correction, such as color white balance, color saturation, lens correction. So it does a lot of things in there. So JPEGs aren't bad, don't get me wrong. I shoot JPEG a lot myself. But if you want like the most dynamic range and exposure latitude and other fine granular controls such as noise reduction and what have you, go ahead and shoot in RAW. And what that'll do is it'll give you the most information from that file. Now the second best thing you can do, or actually maybe the first, is shoot both RAW and JPEG if your camera allows that. And that's an awesome option, because what that does is you're getting the best of both worlds. If you don't want to play with your images, and that's the thing, RAW images, they require require post-processing on your part, so you have to pull it into some type of software that'll read the RAW file, and then you gotta convert it and mess with it. Lightroom, Adobe, Photoshop, what have you, will do that. The JPEGs come right out of the camera as is, and they do a pretty good job in terms of overall color correction, clarity, and all that other fun stuff in average lighting conditions. So if you're daytime or what have you. But when it gets into some of the trickier lighting conditions, it may or may not do so well, and that's why I recommend at least exploring the RAW option. Now, RAW isn't the end-all be-all, trust me. I mean, the files that come out of the camera, they need to be processed. They're not ready for prime time, so to speak. You're gonna put in what I like to call some serious mouse time, clicking your mouse on your software on your computer to eke out all the various details. But definitely check it out. And then I'll show you here my quick workflow and what I do. I try to get it right in the camera, but it's a lot of times, who wants to leave something as is? We always like to tweak it here and there. And there are a couple things I like to do. Pretty much I shoot RAW for the highlight and shadow recovery detail. So to prevent some of the highlights from getting blown out, like outdoors, you can slide the highlight slider to the left, and what that'll do is bring back some of the cloud detail and some of the detail that might be lost in the white areas. And then I like to pull up the shadows to the right a little bit, and what that does, it lifts the detail from the dark areas. It's amazing. Some of these cameras especially some of the newer digital SLR cameras, will recover a lot of shadow detail, which is really amazing. Now, the other things you can do is, bump the clarity and saturation a little bit, maybe play with the tone curves and the luminance noise and noise reduction. You could do you could do endless things, but pretty much I do it for the shadow highlight shadow detail recovery, and of course the white balance too. So if you don't get the white balance right in the camera, or if it doesn't read it properly, you can always go back and mess with the white balance and restore it to a custom balance to whatever you want. And that's the other main option, in my opinion, one of the main advantages of shooting in RAW. Now, RAW files, there are some disadvantages of shooting RAW, aside from the fact that you're gonna probably spend some time with the image afterwards, but also you're gonna have huge file sizes. So the RAW file isn't throwing any information away like a JPEG does. So the file size will be probably 10 to 20 times larger than a JPEG, depending on your camera and your file settings. So different camera manufacturers call the RAW files differently. For instance, Nikon calls their RAW files NEF. I think Canon calls it CR2. Panasonic ARW. So whatever, if you see those weird letters or whatever, it's probably shooting in a RAW file format, which needs further processing in the end. But if you shoot RAW plus JPEG, And then what you want to do is when you're setting the RAW file, also set it to the largest uncompressed option you can get. So if it gives you a choice between 14 or 12 or 14 bit, select a 14 bit. And then if it gives you other compression options, do not use compression. So I usually turn the compression off. And for the JPEGs, what you want to do is use the fine setting, or the highest setting it has on your camera, fine or super fine or whatever, and use the largest file size you can that they give you the option of. That way you're going to preserve all the as much as detail as information in that image as you can. All right, guys, just a quick wrap up here. So yeah, basically RAW files will give you the most information. It's, if you liken it to kind of like a camera's digital negative, and from there a negative needs processing, but at the same time there's a lot of information in that negative. And basically I like to use it for, as mentioned, is to recover highlight and shadow detail and correct white balance after the fact. So basically 3 main reasons why I like to shoot RAW. Of course, you can have the best of both worlds by shooting both RAW and JPEG, as mentioned. But then again, also remember the downfalls of RAW. The files are much larger, so they're going to require more space on your memory card, and also when you transfer to your computer. It also requires post-processing, so you're going to have to put in your mouse time, clicking away and processing your image. And also you're going to have to do all the corrections, whereas a JPEG file out of the camera is ready for prime time. It'll have everything what it thinks is normal. It does a pretty good job. I mean, don't get me wrong. JPEGs in the high quality on modern cameras are pretty dang good. But if you want that extra bit of tweaking and bring out some of the highlights and shadows and correct white balance after the fact, shoot in RAW, or better yet, shoot both RAW and JPEG if your camera allows it. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Ciao.